Welcome to John's Tours. This is a mini-series about William Lever, the soap magnate, and the beautiful garden village of Port Sunlight, situated on the Wirral Peninsula, a village unique with its own irregular vernacular housing. So who was this businessman William Lever? Why did he have 30 different architects create a village for his workforce? Was he a businessman after his own game, or was he a man ahead of his time? Our tour today is about William Lever. William Lever was born in Bolton in 1851, son of a wholesale grocer. A family background of liberalism, nonconformity, and abstinence. The family of 10, 8 girls and 2 boys. He went to junior school and met 2 of the most important people in his life. His future wife, Elizabeth Ellen Hume, and his best friend, Jonathan Simpson, who became an architect and the director of Lever Brothers. He was a precocious child who read avidly. One of those books given to him by his father was Self-Help by Samuel Smiles, and this would influence him for the rest of his life. Frederick Engels had described Bolton as one of the worst in Britain. 60,000 inhabitants, living in badly made homes, cellars, jerry-built terraces, where men, women and children worked in the noise and the heat of the cotton mills. An atmosphere of smoke and darkness that sometimes was elevated by the gin and grog shops. His father's house in 16 Wood Street was only 100 yards away from this infernal, but in truth, a million miles away. In 1867, he wanted to stay on at the Bolton Church Institute and train to become an architect. His mother wanted him to become a doctor. His father vetoed both ideas, and he started work in the family business. Aged 15, apprenticed to his father's shop at 1 shilling a week. A day that began at 7 o'clock and finished late. One of the areas that he was put in charge of was the preparation of sugar and soap. Soap in those days came in solid bars of a foot long, which then had to be sliced down and cut into manageable pieces. Later, he wanted to become a salesman. Lever was a natural salesman. He travelled far and wide from Bolton to such places as Wigan and was an outstanding success. In 1872, at the age of 21, William and Elizabeth became engaged, and 2 years later they were married. And by this time, his father had made William a partner in his company at a salary of £800 a year. It should be noted that a mill worker would only earn approximately £92 a year. By 1884, after holiday cruising in the north of Scotland, he decided that he had enough of the grocery business and made up his mind to go into the manufacturing of soap. In 1800, the average consumption of soap in Britain was £2 per person a year for working people. Due to Victorian concern about cleanliness, William Gladstone, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, abandoned the soap tax in 1852 at an annual loss to the Exchequer of over £1 million. Can you imagine a tax on soap? By 1900, there had been at least a 3-fold increase in the purchases of soap. Since 1874, Lever and Company had already been selling soap called Lever's Pure Honey Soap, made by manufacturers, but there were numerous complaints about the quality of the soap. Lever decided that he would manufacture a new soap and called it Sunlight. It was made out of 90% vegetable oils, but still had the tendency to smell because during the storage it had the tendency to perspire and become rancid. It was only the top layer that became rancid, and when you washed the top layer off, the soap was really good, and that customers actually asked for that stinky soap. The manufacturers could not overcome this problem, so in 1885, William became a soap manufacturer. He leased out a factory in Warrington. He decided to review the formula of making soap with Percy Windsor, a trained chemist, and Edward Wainwright, a chief soap boiler maker, and together they changed the formula of the soap to 25% tallow, 24% cotton oil, 9% resin, and 42% copra or palm oil. In January 1886, production of soap was 20 tons a week, and by the end of the year, it was over 150 tons a week. and the following year, in December 1887, production was 540 tonnes a week. Lever's Sunlight Soap was a success, but he had now to expand. But the landlords demanded more money for that expansion. So William was determined to find a brand new site that had room for expansion, free from landlord restrictions, free from the tolls of the Mersey Docks and Harbour Board, and it had some harbour and port facilities. William looked to both sides of the River Mersey and finally settled on an area in Lower Bevington, adjoining a martial tidal inlet from the River Mersey known as Brumborough Pool. The area was subject to flooding and had tidal ravines crossing the area. There already were several businesses here, such as Price Candles, a cement works, and a wharf that had a railway line that came from Staunton Quarry. Communication links were good, with the A41 road between Birkenhead and Chester and the railway line from Liverpool to Chester. In February 1888, William and his brother, James, bought 52 acres. In total, over the course of time, the brothers bought a total of 330 acres. And so, on Saturday the 3rd of March 1888, an 8 months pregnant Elizabeth cut the first sod for the building of the factory. William and all his friends retired to the Bears Paw pub in Liverpool, and he made a speech that ended with the following sentence, which I believe sums up his ambitions for the new village that he called Port Sunlight after his famous soap and for his workforce. It is my hope and my brother's hope someday to build houses in which our people will be able to live and be comfortable. Semi-detached houses with gardens back and front, in which they will be able to know more about the science of life than they can in a back slum, and in which they will learn there is more enjoyment in life than the mere going to and returning from work, and looking forward to the Saturday night to draw their wages. The first soap boil in a new factory took place on June 25th, 1889. The first houses started to be built in 1890. Over the next 35 years, Lever employed over 30 different architects. The street plan at Port Sunlight had long been drawn up, a system of vast boulevards, and he left space by these boulevards not just for gardens back and front, but also for parks and recreational areas. The time that Port Sunlight was conceived was at the height of Victorian domestic architecture. Lever liked the Old English vernacular and Elizabethan revivalism, and admired the timber framing of the Northwest. This revival was in the arts and crafts mode, using quality materials and craftsmanship. Planning rules in those days dictated that there should be a maximum of 42 houses to the acre. Lever wished to have just between 10 to 12. Many houses in the UK were over 80 to the acre. And here I will describe the two types of houses that are in Port Sunlight. The kitchen type with one large room downstairs, a kitchen cum living room which accommodated the cooking range on one corner, and a dining table with a scullery, bathroom, pantry and 3 bedrooms upstairs. Kitchen houses were originally built for £200, but by 1901 had risen to £330. It must be remembered that an average terraced house could be built just for £60. The second type of house was called the parlour type, and it was very similar to the kitchen type, but with an additional parlour downstairs and 4 bedrooms upstairs. Prices were £330 in 1889, but £550 by 1901. 800 houses of both types were built by 1925 at the time of Lever's death. Bathrooms at the beginning would be on the back door. Why? Because Lever said that those coming in from work could strip off, get washed, without trailing their dirt and sweat throughout the house. This luxury sometimes gave way to a covered bath in the scullery. And Lever gave a great deal of thought to the detail of the houses. As many fittings as possible were built in to provide, such as coat racks, gas fittings, cupboards and hooks, boilers, ranges and coppers. These houses today may seem cramped by modern standards, but with 3 bedrooms, mum and dad, girls and boys could all sleep in separate bedrooms. No one had to sleep in the living room. He was one of the first to develop the superblock. Every house would have a garden back and front, and behind the house would be a large space used for a communal allotment. No 2 blocks of cottages are the same, giving the village a wonderful variety, and these blocks throughout the village range in size from 2 to 18 cottages, although most are between 3 and 10. Each house had its own toilet, 7 foot away from the back door. All houses had access to hot and cold water. The rooms were approximately 14 foot by 12 foot. The rent for these houses depended on the size of the house. The average rent for a 3-bedroom house was 5 shillings and 9 old pence, and the average rent for a 4-bedroom house was 8 shillings and 9 old pence. The above included rates and repairs, and were represented between a quarter and a fifth of the weekly wage. This was part of Lever's ideal of prosperity sharing. Instead of profit sharing in terms of bonus, the company would provide decent housing, amenities and welfare provision. Lever's business would subsidize the building and the upkeep of the village. He didn't seek a financial gain, but as reported by W. L. George, who wrote his 1909 book Labour and Housing in Port Sunlight, Lever wanted to establish friendly relations between capital and labour. He wanted to get his men to do the best work, to make the men's comfort depend on the firm's prosperity, and by treating the men as well as possible, leaving it to the consciousness to repay. Lever and his architects were conscious that a village built around a soap factory should be able to represent to the world a clean face. Houses facing the railway looked out to the world. Rules were imposed of houses' front gardens, and the grass would be cut by the company. Clean-cut Rauburn bricks with ashlar stone facings. White plaster work against a black timber, and today you can hardly see any flaking or weathering. His prosperity sharing went further. In 1892, the Sick Funeral and Medical Society was formed, and in return for weekly payments between 2 old pence and 18 old pence, members and their families were entitled to free medical attendance. In 1894, an 8-hour working day was introduced, one of the first in the country to do so. 1904, a pension fund for men over 65 and women 60, and it should be noted that when Lever was an MP in 1907, he introduced a private member's bill for old age pensions. It passed the second reading, but lapsed due to lack of time. It was reintroduced the following year as a government measure for people over 70, for people with an income of less than £31.50 a year. There were subsidised meals were introduced with a 3-course meal costing 3 old pence. In January 1905, 1 week's holiday with pay was introduced, and there were many holiday outings that we will discuss later. In 1910, he addressed the Royal Institute of Public Health. Business cannot be carried out by physically deficient employees any more than a war can be successfully waged with physically deficient soldiers. Business expediency therefore demands better housing conditions for employees, apart altogether from the principle of employees' own rights to the same. In 1922, half-pay sickness scheme was introduced. And so this concludes my introduction to Port Sunlight of Lever and his ideas, and we will now start a tour of the village.